What is going on in this conflict? Is it a genocide?
Well, I think this is a really important question. As you know, the definition of genocide is the intent to destroy in whole or part an ethnic, religious, national, or racial group as such. And as we know from the cases of Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Yugoslavia at the International Court of Justice, and from some of the cases at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, I think of the Kristic case, we know that the courts have a very high bar as to what is genocide. And I think that the idea that the Israelis are trying to destroy in whole or part the Palestinians is wrong. And I agree with Aaron Barak, who is the Israeli ad hoc judge on this case at the International Court of Justice, where he says the real framework we should be looking at, the legal framework, is international humanitarian law. Mm-hmm. I think this is the real problem that we have. We need to be looking at, and I think with this new issues which have arisen, international law works on the basis that parties act in good faith. And we know what the international humanitarian law says. It says two principles, really. You must distinguish between civilians and combatants, and you must only use military action which has a realistic possibility of achieving its goal. And those two principles, which are contained in different ways in the Hague Conventions and the Geneva Conventions, are very clear. The problem we have, I think, in the Gaza situation is we have an organization, Hamas, who completely ignores this. And what we don't have in international law, in my view, is the right answer, which is how you deal with a party to a conflict who ignores international law completely. They do all the things that they're not supposed to do. They launch attacks from civilian areas. They use protected buildings, schools, mosques, United Nations offices, and so on and so forth for military purposes, all of these things. And though I have absolute suspicion of some of the military activities of the Israelis, I mean, I don't mean the overall action, but the individual military operations, I do see that we haven't actually got a legal answer to the question of how parties to conflict deal with the other party who completely ignores the laws and customs of war. And so I think that's a much more important question. And I think the use of the term genocide is dangerous because I think it becomes political rhetoric. And I think it doesn't focus upon what we actually really need to concentrate on, which is how we implement international humanitarian law.
Yes. I remember the first few months of me attending your class and being in law school, I remember I would say things like, oh, that must be genocide, that must be ethnic cleansing. And what you and other professors will always say is go back to the law and you have to check the framework. You can't just use buzzwords because then you cheapen the word. You have to make sure that it aligns with what the law says it is. So we can't go through all the whole list because it's a lot. But I would just encourage viewers not to fall into the trap of, oh, it must be ethnic cleansing, or it must be genocide, but really deeply look into those resources and that are available on the internet. You don't have to be a lawyer to be able to check, look at the genocide convention, the conventions. They have it free in the United Nations website, and really read it for yourself and understand, what it is and how it applies to this situation.